Welcome to Pegwarmers. I'm Kevin, and I'm here to talk about toys. Happy Valentine's Day. Today I decided I want to talk about some of the female characters from 80s cartoons, from Cheetara to April O'Neil, but I'm going to focus on G.I. Joe characters. There have been a lot of great female characters in cartoons and comics that support toy lines, some of which get figures, some of which don't. Oftentimes, the ones that do get made are reported back as pegwarmers or figures that didn't sell that well by the execs at the toy companies, stating the reason why they don't make a lot of female characters. King Randor got a figure, but Queen Marlena didn't from He-Man. In the Cops and Crooks toy line, there were several important female police officers and bad guys that didn't get toys. These things happen. Masters of the Universe had two early on with Teela and Evil Lyn, and then later the Sorceress. Thundercats had Cheetara with a PVC Wily kit. Later on in the Companions line, they made an articulated Wily kit, and at the tail end, they made Pumira. There were other female characters in the show, and for the number of male characters, it's pretty small. G.I. Joe Real American Hero managed to release one female figure per year for the first several years of the toy line. Those female characters have become core characters embedded in the brand, and many of them have been released over and over and over again. But the well's actually pretty deep on the number of female characters, but we just didn't see a lot of them until the brand became more of a collector's brand, and we started seeing a lot more female characters made for things like convention sets, comic book packs based on old comics, figure subscription lines, things like that. 1992... kick off G.I. Joe with the straight arm lineup with Scarlet. In my recent episode about G.I. Joe Day, I mentioned that a document Kirk Bazigian had with the original lineup did not include Scarlet. So Scarlet snuck into that original line, getting a female character in there early on. I have to think Ron Rudat had something to do with that. Ron was the figure designer, and he really liked designing female characters. He talks about that a lot, the Baroness being his favorite character. I know the guys at Marvel were important in the development of Cobra, because they said they needed a bad guy. A lot of times there is at least one female character in a toy brand for storytelling purposes, having relationships, friendships, someone to rescue, things like that. And not to always say the girl is the damsel in distress, but having a dynamic where it's not just a bunch of dudes helps with the storytelling, right? Even the Power Rangers team has 3 guys and 2 girls, because everybody brings a little bit of a different dynamic to that team. In 1983, we got Scarlet version 1.5, so this is just an update of her, but an all-new female character in CoverGirl. I love the concept of CoverGirl, a supermodel who joins the army. She drives a tank. She didn't get a ton of personality in the early comics or cartoon, but later on with I believe it was the Devil's Due era, where there was a thing between her and Shipwreck, I thought was a fun kind of storytelling element where the supermodel was dating the scallywag sailor. My other favorite thing about CoverGirl is that, like, literally the only time the Joes lose in a commercial is the Wolverine commercial, and they have to come and tow the Wolverine out with the tow strap, showing off a feature. But instead of CoverGirl towing the Vamp out and helping out Clutch, it's kind of the other way around. 1984 saw the release of the Baroness. This was a character created for the comic by Larry Hama. Then she was made into an action figure and has been a core Cobra character, probably as important to the brand as Scarlet is. In 1985, we see the release of Lady J, the Covert Operative. Some of these characters' military specialities were very confusing to me as a kid. Scarlet was counterintelligence. The Baroness was intelligence. Covert operations for Lady J. What do these people do? They don't have real army jobs to a little kid. Obviously, they play important roles. Information is a huge part of the battle, and covert operations is huge. Being able to sneak around and be unnoticed, of course it's important. It's just a funny thing printed on the back of a toy package. Kids understand the machine gunner and the flamethrower and the mortar trooper. But covert operations, what is that? 1986, my favorite year of G.I. Joe, and we saw the release of Zorana, whose military speciality is Zartan's sister. You know, all these other ladies at least have a military job. She's just nepotism. Zarana went on to become a very popular character, a very interesting looking action figure, and, obviously, it's great to have those new characters bolstering the ranks. Her brother, Xandar, got released that year also, and he's a mostly forgotten character compared to Zarana. 1987, we saw the release of Jinx, who was a ninja/intelligence. Ninjas are always popular. She got a part in G.I. Joe the movie. Fun action figure who's actually about to get a update in Classifieds. But I also think 1987 was a missed opportunity with them not releasing Pythona. Important character in the movie. I don't know if they would have considered trying to release her the next year if Cobra Law had continued as a trend. There is some rumors that they had tried to create some more Cobra Law stuff, and that's where Nullifier came from. There's like an insectoid motorcycle, unreleased concept. But I've never seen real Pythona art other than some sketches where she looks more like Serpentor. And it's unclear whether that actually was like where the concept came from for the movie, or if it was actually a concept for a toy. But I don't think they tried to produce a Pythona based on the movie until the adult collectors got in the figure subscription service. I actually would really love for Super 7 to do an O-Rank Pythona. It's about time. 1988, the beginning of the dark times, no female figure released. This is around the time that the buying market of the toy line is shifting, and the figures are selling more than the vehicles. So that might be a reason why they didn't put in a female figure, if the female figures were the least popular figures. There was a Steel Brigade figure that year where you get to be a G.I. Joe, and so perhaps the girls could order one as well, and one of the Steel Brigades might be a female. Hard to tell under that big bulbous helmet. 1989, again, no female characters. This is the start of the Deke cartoon series, and we see characters like the Baroness and Zarana and Scarlet and Lady J show up throughout that cartoon series, even though they had no action figures on the shelf. The drought continues through 1990, 1991, and 1992. 1993, though, we get a new version of Scarlet with Ninja Force Scarlet. Maybe not the best figure, but it's great to have Scarlet back in the brand as a figure that you can own. There's also 2 releases of Chun-Li that year, if you count the Street Fighter figures. So for having about 5 years with no women, getting 2 characters or 3 versions of female characters, all using the same body mold, that's a kind of a big deal for the brand. 1994, there were no female characters. This is sort of a smaller year. 93 had a lot of characters. 94 was a little bit smaller. The toy line gets canceled, but we do know they were working on a Baroness for 1995, so there would have been another female character coming. G.I. Joe goes into dormancy, and then is eventually resurrected in 1997 with a Toys R Us line that was aimed at collectors. We see Scarlet, Lady J, and the Baroness all brought back, all main characters to the G.I. Joe brand. It's cool that they were able to include them for sure. But again, we're not seeing any growth in the G.I. Joe brand now at this point with characters. Then in 1998, out of the blue, Hasbro releases a new female character. Reusing the mold of Jinx, we get Vipra. She's a ninja Jeep driver. What a weird combination. Great looking action figure. And it's great that we're building the brand again. Vipra would go on to get 2 more releases in the O-Ring Toys R Us series later on as part of like a Troop Builder Ninja set. And we would also get a pretty divergent version of her through Classifieds. In the year 2000, we get a new character who looks like an old character. I was never a huge fan of this concept, but the Baroness had been burned in a fire, and her half-sister, going by the codename Chameleon, impersonates Baroness within Cobra, but is really a Joe operative trying to sabotage Cobra from within. I mean, it's not a bad storytelling idea, but it was weird getting a package of a figure that says Cobra Commander and Chameleon, and it's really Cobra Commander and the Baroness. We've kind of seen this before when Cobra Commander wasn't really Cobra Commander, but he was Fred. So, 2002, we roll into the new sculpt era, and again, now we're going to start seeing a bunch of our favorite characters reissued in new sculpts. Scarlet and Lady J and Baroness. 2003, 2004, we continue with these new sculpt releases of our favorite female characters, as well as those 2 new versions of Vipra that I mentioned in the Ninja Packs. 2005 was a good year for new female characters. One, we get introduced to Bombstrike. Bombstrike has a brother on the Joe team, Barrel Roll, and a brother on the Cobra side called Blackout. This was a really great storytelling element for 3 characters that didn't really have any lasting impact on the G.I. Joe mythos, but in that moment in time, that Venom vs. Valor era of G.I. Joe after Spy Troops, it was a good concept, right? G.I. Joe used to have a comic and a cartoon show to tell stories, tell kids how to play with the toys. By this point in time, they're getting like 1 movie a year, these CGI movies to help push the brand forward, right? Storytelling, telling kids how to play with toys is a great way to get kids into toys. And so having a little family drama there with a brother and sister on the Joe team while their brothers on the bad guys, probably more interesting than Zartan and his siblings all being on one team. Unfortunately, Bombstrike really hasn't done much since then. I think she did get 1 more modern figure, but, the character's mostly forgotten. We also saw a bunch more female characters in the comic packs. We got a new version of Scarlet, a new version of Zorana, and Diana, the original leading lady from the October Guard, finally gets a figure, mostly using Lady J's body, but it's great to have her finally in figure form. In 2007, the Collectors Club released a female version of Doc. This was the original Doc's daughter, now joining the Joe team. A fun way to bring back an old character and kind of revitalize things and add to the diversity of the team by adding another female character. I sometimes kind of hate when they reuse code names, but it kind of works for Doc. 2009 saw the release of several new female characters. Agent Helix was probably the most impactful new character, being used a fair amount in the comics and having multiple figures released. Agent Helix was part of the 4th wave of Rise of Cobra action figures based on the movie. She was actually developed for the Rise of Cobra video game and got a toy and got introduced in the comics and sort of fleshed out more so than a lot of these female characters through good storytelling. 2009 also saw the first figure of Dial Tone as a female character. Dial Tone, a classic G.I. Joe character who's a communications specialist, is now a female character. We saw her in the Rise of Cobra toy line. We saw her in G.I. Joe Renegades. There's also an appearance by her in one of the G.I. Joe novels. There's a book, and I actually got to meet some of the authors of the short stories contained within this story. And the author that used Dial Tone said he didn't know that Hasbro was gender swapping Dial Tone. So there's actually a couple mistakes in the book where, because he had written he in all the parts, or him or whatever, and they were switching it over to the female version, and the editors missed a couple spots, and he was a little bit disappointed. He's like, I don't care that she's a woman, but if they had told me ahead of time, I would have made sure that that was all correct. We also saw a direct-to-consumer version of Muntilla. I believe I'm saying that right. She was one of the Plague Troopers. This was a team of bad guys designed for the comic book, and she's gone on to have a couple of releases. Again, another fairly forgotten character. 2007 saw the action figure release of Zanaya, Zartan's daughter. She was a popular character based on the comic book in a specific era of time, mostly forgotten now, and I don't think her figure looked that great. She was a younger character in the comic books, like an older teenager, an adult, but young. And her action figure made her look like everyone else, like a 35-year-old person. And so it just didn't really do her justice. But she was a cool character in the comic, and, maybe someday we'll see her make a return to the continuity. In 2016, we saw the release of a female character whose codename dates back all the way to 1982. In the original G.I. Joe comic book, there's a screen showing off all the different Joe characters, and there's a hand pointing, covering up the face of a character, but the codename Shooter can be seen. This was a joke for the editor of Marvel Comics, Jim Shooter, but that name kind of floated around, and people would make custom sniper figures over the years based on that name. And eventually, in G.I. Joe Declassified, a series of comic books that sort of told the backstory to more of the characters, Shooter was a member of the G.I. Joe team in that, a female character, and we finally saw a figure of her in 2016. She came in a Night Force-esque pack with Outback and Falcon, and she has gone on to see a release in Classifieds. 2018, we saw the release of Heartwrencher. She's a Dreadnought mechanic, and the Collectors Club put her out with a Ground Assault Jeep. Another fun character. It's nice to have a female on the Dreadnoughts that isn't related to Zartan. Unfortunately, just like Zanaya, she uses a bunch of Zarana's parts, so the three of them all become very much the same character. Around the same time, an action figure named Verona, who is a member of the October Guard in the comics, was released as part of the figure subscription service. Again, another kind of forgettable character. Unless you were reading the comics in that era, a lot of these characters just didn't amount to anything. 2017 saw the release of Dr. Sidney Biggles-Jones. This was a scientist working on developing a railgun. She was in the G.I. Joe comic books back in the early 90s at the tail end of the comic and toy line. She didn't receive a figure back in the early 90s, but in 2017, the G.I. Joe Collectors Club did release her. It's not the best figure in the world, but it was nice to see a character like that get a figure. So it's possible I missed somebody somewhere. This list goes to show that there's a fair amount of female characters, but it's a little bit sad that it boils down to Scarlet, Baroness, Lady J, Jinx, and Zarana. Those 5 ladies, the only ones that anybody really cares about, the only ones that get released consistently, and the only ones that ever get used in media. I do have some figures here to pop open. Right here. I do have, as far as new to the collection goes, I do have some G.I. Joe classified figures to open up and take a look at. First up, I've got Shooter. She comes out of the package wearing a gas mask. That's kind of an interesting choice. I believe this is an alternate head, but that's a pretty nice looking figure. She's got a holster on her leg and lots of pads and a Kevlar vest. Wow, the gas mask and her hair are a swappable option. So we're not changing heads. She just has multiple hairstyles. That's an interesting feature, kind of a cool way of handling that. She comes with a great looking sniper rifle with a removable clip. She's got a pistol, she's got a knife, and some other attachment here. I think this is so she can sling the rifle on her back, but I'll have to do a little bit of investigating to see if I can make that work. Next up, I've got a Kiko. It's time to finally open my Snake Eyes movie action figures, since they're never going to be worth anything. I bought these at full price, excited, hopeful that the movie would be good. You can still get these guys on clearance if you're interested. But Akiko is a new character to the G.I. Joe brand. There have been other members of the Arashikage family in the comic book, so she might be an amalgamation of some of those characters, or all new. She's not really a member of the Joe team, technically. She's one of the Arashikage ninjas that don't necessarily align. Some members have joined Joe, some members have joined Cobra, some members have switched sides, and some members are independent operators. She's dressed in a black and white ninja gi, has a little bit of a Mortal Kombat look to her. Overall, though, a nice looking figure. The face sculpt likeness seems pretty much the way I remember the movie. Only saw it once back when it first came out. But, it's a decent likeness, and she's got traditional classified type articulation, of course, and she comes with a handful of ninja accessories. She's got a staff with 2 blades on the ends, as well as 2 swords. I'm wondering if the staff is actually supposed to be the swords connected. I don't remember if she does that in the movie, but the accessories kind of look like that's what's going on there. Snake Eyes movie Baroness. The actress in the movie did a pretty good job of representing the character. I think she probably did a better job than Sienna Miller did in the Rise of Cobra movie. Unfortunately, this movie was dead on arrival. So, we'll see. Maybe someday there'll be a third actress to try playing the Baroness. I feel like the costume designers did a good job of making the Baroness feel like the Baroness in the movie, but not quite straight up wearing a dominatrix outfit in public. She does have removable glasses. I like when action figures have actual glasses that have transparent lenses in them. That often looks good, but I often find loose glasses to be a problem. They often get lost, or they don't sit on the character's face right, so I'm trying to see if I can make this work. They tuck into the sides of her hair, and the peg spots aren't super noticeable, which is good. She's got a Cobra logo on her belt. Her back reveals 2 holsters for holding weapons. She's got a lot of nice textured details to her legs and the armor and things like that. And she looks like a pretty decent Baroness figure. Baroness comes with a submachine gun with a silencer, as well as 2 machete-like knives. The machete knives are what go in the holsters on her back, so it's not for twin pistols, but for concealed silent weapons. But they are pretty cool. The last female figure I'm opening up for this Valentine's Day episode from Classifieds is the movie Scarlet figure. Again, I felt like the actress did a pretty good job of playing Scarlet. Her introduction was a little bit random, just shows up. It's like, hey, I'm a member of the G.I. Joe team, and Snake Eyes is like, yo, Joe. Yeah, but she looked the part. They really shortchanged Scarlet. She got 1 accessory. I'm not sure if Hasbro reduced the number of accessories on these figures because they were paying an actor's likeness for the figures, but all of these guys that I've opened so far from the movie I felt like are a little bit under-equipped. You want to sell female figures to little boys, you gotta give them some good accessories. So again, the costume designers did a nice job of giving this character a tactical-looking uniform that harkens back to the original Scarlet a little bit. It's so much better than the reactive body armor they wore in Rise of Cobra, where everyone just wore the black jumpsuits like the X-Men in the early 2000s. It's not a bad-looking figure. I kind of like the head sculpt. I like that she has the ponytail. Again, she comes with the crossbow, but it's a shame that there's no real added accessories, a knife or a pistol. She has a holster, a non-working holster on her hip. It would have been cool if she came with a pistol, or like I said, a knife that could go in her boot or something. Just a little something else to kind of add a little pizzazz to the figure. Alright guys, I hope you are out on a date with your wife or your girlfriend instead of watching this episode on Wednesday night. Thanks for watching it at a later date. I do appreciate that. If you made it this far in the video, hit the like button and leave a comment down below letting me know who your favorite female G.I. Joe character is. Those kind of interactions tell YouTube I make quality content and encourages them to share my content with other people. If you want to support the channel further, you can join us on Patreon for bonus content. But I really appreciate you guys viewing the episode and for hanging on the peg with me.